Hello, everyone. Welcome to Power to the People, hosted by the NAACP. I'm your host, Corbin Snardon, giving you the information that you need to empower your community. Today, on this episode, we're going to be talking about fair housing and housing inequality. And I have two very special guests with me here today. I have Ms. Latoya Burton, who is with the Paducah Housing Authority, and I have Mr. Andiamo Wright, who is with the Massac County Housing Authority. We're going to start off today's show with just some basic introductions. Let's start with Miss Burton. If you would, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Again, my name is Latoya Burton. I'm a Chicago native. I've lived or resided in Paducah since 2015. Been here at the Housing Authority since 2017. Just at the heart of what I do, just giving back. I'm again raised in the South Side of Chicago, so I'm familiar with just inequalities in housing, and I would like to become the change that I want to see, and just trying to do my part. So, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Mr. White, if you would, same question.
Yes, good morning. My name is Andiamo Wright. I am the executive director for the Massac County Housing Authority. I'm going into my 19th year working in the public housing industry. I started at Paducah's Housing Authority, went to Lexington's Housing Authority, and now I am working here. This is my second year as the executive director for Massac. I'm a Paducah native, and like Toya, just want to do what I can to eradicate inequalities and do what's best for the citizens of Paducah and our community.
Yes, and thank you for being on the show today. So let's jump right into talking about housing inequality. When we are talking about America and fair housing, affordable housing, we obviously know that it's not equal. We know that housing is a struggle for many people in the country, and it disproportionately affects people of color. Just to throw out just a few basic stats, I just read in Forbes magazine that in the first quarter of 2020, Black households had the lowest rate of home ownership at 44%, and that is 30% less than white families that have home ownership. If we go back even a little bit further and we talk about just how Blacks in general, or other people of color as well, have been excluded from being able to purchase homes in certain areas, or being able to have access to fair and equal housing. You know, we see that these things are happening on here. And I'm going to pose this question to Mr. White first. In your experience, you've been in working for public housing, you said, for about 19 years. In your opinion, why are these things happening? What is causing such this disparity in housing?
Well, I think one of it is, like you said, it's discrimination. It's just a practice that's happened in this country forever, pretty much. And you look at one thing about it, you got redlining, where they discriminate against people of color and don't want to give you certain financial resources to get housing. As far as what public housing, I know one thing with HUD, we do not tolerate any sort of inequalities with housing, but I think it's just the basically with discrimination of people of color as far as getting the financial resources.
Okay, thank you. I want to hound on one topic that you mentioned right there. You said redlining. For our viewers out there today, what do you mean when you say redlining?
Well, with the redlining, I heard it quite a bit during the Democratic debates. Former Mayor Bloomberg, he talked about, he was a big proponent of redlining. That was one of the things that stopped him on his quest to become the president. They brought up redlining a lot against him. It's just where you use keeping people in certain parts of the country, of a neighborhood, from getting the financial resources to move up into better quality living in different parts of neighborhoods, or not given the financial resources. Let's say, for instance, for our south side of Paducah is an example of that. Right now, you see our Fountain Avenue area of Paducah, they've got quite a bit of finances to redo that area. Well, hopefully the city will work on doing that on the south side. But at this moment, you see that south side is pretty much ran down. And it's not, I don't know if that's majority of people, I'm from the south side of Paducah, so it's a majority of African Americans in that area where I was anyway. So you see a lot of rundown buildings, houses, and everything. But the city's gonna take care of it and push the money that way. If not, to me, that's kind of like redlining and keeping the financial resources from there, but pushing them into the Fountain Avenue area, the Lower Town area, which is where it's been past several years or so.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Burton, I'm coming to you. So you bring a unique perspective. You've moved here to Paducah and you're working with the Paducah Housing Authority, but you said you were also born and raised in Southside Chicago.
Yes.
And I would like to kind of combine those two experiences together. And, what has been your experience when you're looking at access to fair housing? Because you're looking at it from a very urban population. Chicago is a very, very large city in comparison to Paducah, but what's your perspective on that?
That's a big part of it is perspective. So just a little sidetrack. In 1996, due to structural changes in my family, we moved to Hickman, Kentucky, and I was moved into what the community deemed as the projects. And to me, it was a nice apartment. It was plush, quote unquote, plush living, because coming from Chicago, where my definition of projects is, high-rise buildings with graffiti on the walls, urine, no grass, drugs, rape, all of that. So again, it's perspective, but I think just as far as this conversation, everything stems with having an understanding. So yes, redlining is a big part of it, but my question is not what inequalities exist, but why do they exist? So if we just go back, just a quick brief history, going back to 1865 with the abolition or the abolishment of slavery. And then just a sad note that most studies say it takes 21 days to create a habit. So you're talking 150 years if we go back to 1865 to 1965 when the Civil Rights Acts and then Fair Housing Act was enacted. So in between that time, like what happened, what transpired? So again, 100 years almost before any real change took effect. So 1865, the abolishment of slavery. But basically, it just changed the wording from slaves to indentured servitude when you have the same Confederate soldiers who fought in the Civil War, who are now the lawyers, they're the judge, they're the jury and such forth. And so they can say what a crime is. And of course, they imprison African Americans for, same quote unquote crimes whites or non-blacks are committing, but African Americans get harsher crimes. So now you're getting a criminal record, just things that inhibit you from having a fair opportunity. Again, redlining, the term wasn't coined that far back, but the same thing, segregating and making it impossible for African Americans to live in certain parts. Okay, so now we fast forward to 1920 when, it was natural disasters. The Dust Bowl caused a huge migration of African Americans from the South going toward northern states with, the merging of the Harlem Renaissance when, there was a critical, pivotal time in African American history. I mean, droves a million of African Americans going from sharecroppers to owning homes, jazz, literary movements, etc. But then what happens after that? The Great Depression. So then you get this New Deal. On top of that, with the Depression, the Dust Bowl happened. So then it caused sharecroppers from the South again, and millions of droves, they become refugees to migrate now to the North. So where African Americans have begun to establish ourselves in culture, you have, again, the government enacting legislation, which is known as the New Deal or the first National Housing Act, which again, it is granting housing relief to Americans. But at this point in time, African Americans are not even considered Americans. We don't have official right to vote. On paper, it says Americans, but if you can't read, they got literacy tests, or just all these different barriers. Now fast forward again, going to the 80s, Reaganomics. So every time there's legislation to help the economy whenever there's a crisis, only people that tend to benefit from it is whites. So you have the GI Bill, when you had millions of, again, African Americans go to war and promise that, yeah, we'll give you housing stipends, access to education, this, that, and the third. Well, to a point they did, but then you wasn't eligible for it. Or do you realize that the first public housing and how it was enacted back in 1935 in Atlanta, Georgia, evicted hundreds of African Americans to build a 605 unit that was only accessible to whites only, in a way to segregate and keep African Americans And these are where the red lines were developers, where either you would not get funding if you built near African-American communities, or you gave mortgages or access to them. So they built highways. That's how all that came about. Highways, bridges, again, geographical ways to keep African-American segregated. So if you got us in the same areas with lackadaisical education, no jobs, what do you have? You get the one they call it the ghetto or the project. So again, it's not what inequalities exist, but why they exist. Until there's change in legislation, we're going to keep continuing to see the same. So again, fast forward, Paducah is on no magnitude the same things you would see in Chicago, but the same exclusions, segregation, displacement, oppression, it's still the same.
And, that's unfortunate that we still have to deal with those things, and talking with the history lesson that kind of goes along with that, we know that, historically, African Americans have been shut out from things like FHA loans, being able to have access to the loans that, allow you to be able to even get a home. There are so many families now, white families, that have survived off of generational wealth of being able to purchase homes through FHA back in the 30s and the 40s. But I want to pose this question to Mr. Wright as well. So, we see that African Americans particularly, but other people of color have also been very discriminated and exploited because of, practices and policies. I also want to talk about things like, when somebody is trying to get out and somebody is trying to get on their feet and trying to purchase a home. Mr. Wright, do you have any experience with individuals who are trying to do that and may have experienced something like predatory lending, or, just being shut out from being able to even purchase a loan, or not being able to acquire enough for a down payment? What's your experience with that, Mr. Wright?
Well, I could probably say myself in a sense. When me and my wife applied for our loan, the amount we got with our jobs, let's say our income was, let's say, about $90,000 total income. And one of her coworkers, their income, they were like both teachers' aides. And our credit was good, and theirs was too, I guess. But we only got a certain amount of a loan for our house compared to what they had, even though we had, what she said, they had our credit score was higher than theirs, and just from what the person had told her, and our income was, but they had gotten $150,000 loan when the most we could have got was 80. But if you look in just recently in the news, there was you look at this African American woman had went to get her house appraised, and they gave her a certain price of what the house would be. But so what they would give her for it, for the amount it was appraised for. And so she had one of her white friends go and do the same thing to her house. And that appraisal for the same house was a lot higher. And I don't know if there's a lawsuit going on for that, but that's what happened. I've even seen the instances when I worked at Paducah's housing, not in the loan thing, but a tenant went to an organization to get help to pay her rent. And when she called the organization to ask for money to help her to pay her rent, they told her they didn't have any. Well, she called me and told me about it. I said, I didn't really know what to tell her. So she used her head and she disguised her voice, in a sense, however, as if she was a white person. And she said it was in less than 5 minutes after she had called them, she called back, and the woman told her, "Oh, come on in, we got money." So just off of the distinguishing of our voices, which we all know we all are racist, you can tell the difference in voices. They told her to come in because they thought she was of a different color. It was a shock to me when she told me about that. But that's what happens, and when you get bank loans and everything, because of your color, you may get a less amount, or you may not get any. Period.
Yeah, thank you. So that's been historically what data has even shown is that, not being able to get a fair shake at a loan. And even when we talk about other things, and we know for those of us who were around in 2008, which I think we all were, when the housing market crashed, and in large part it crashed due to the fact of predatory lending, where, you do have the problem of people not being able to get loans, but you also have the extreme end of the spectrum where people are being given loans for homes that are way out of their range. which on either end is still discrimination. You know, if I couldn't afford a $400,000 house and you still give me the loan for it, then obviously, you know, you're preying on me and hoping that I just pay you interest for the next rest of my life. I also want to shift gears and kind of talk about, we've got about 10 minutes or so. I want to kind of shift gears and talk about gentrification as well. I know all of us on this call have, you know, some experience in kind of seeing that. Mr. Wright, you mentioned, you know, Southside Paducah is in a rundown state in comparison to other areas of town like Fountain Avenue and Lower Town. And Ms. Burton, you've been in multiple places. You said you've moved in Hickman, you're in Paducah now, you've been in Chicago. I'm gonna shift this question to you, but have you noticed or do you see any signs of gentrification either in our area or have you experienced it personally?
Yes, both. Definitely here in Paducah. And again, it's always going to come down to money is a driver and who has most of the wealth in our country. It's going to be Caucasians. And so until we can have a seat at the table and be invited to when changes are made and that affects us and our culture and the way that we live, we're going to continue to see it. Money it drives our legislation. It shouldn't, but I mean, that's just the reality of the thing. And so, yes, it's going to continue to be impacted bad until one, as African Americans, we take an initiative and start, you know, I say a revolution, but not in the fact of being violent, but, you know, disrupting the way things are I think is over with for no reform, trying to just rechange the same thing. You keep doing the same thing, we're going to keep getting the same results. And so it's just a call for, in my opinion, a revolution for us to want to take initiative, become the Dr. Kings and Malcolm X's, you know, of the past and take that mindset into, if we want change, that's the step to getting there.
Thank you. I want to talk about some, you know, positive things here. You know, we've talked a lot about the discrimination that goes on, and that is all very true. But both of you are working for your respective housing authorities, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of educating our listeners and viewers who may be a part of the housing authority, or what I guess I'm asking is, what programs or what kind of assistance do you guys offer to be able to help citizens with housing? And I'll pose that to either person, whoever wants it first.
Okay, I'll start. The first step is one, educating ourselves as, you know, the face people come in to get housing, being well versed in networking and learning what resources are available in the community. So if someone comes in and they can't pay the rent, we can direct them to a West Kentucky Allied Services or a St. Vincent de Paul. Of that magnitude, they have the Midtown Alliance. So we just, United Way is also impactful community network that we have. They have a plethora of resources. If we can defer them to the United Way, and they can, you know, link them to different resources. But I think the first thing is, you know, educating our staff and getting us up to snuff with just cultural diversities, different mindsets you may come across, and just getting a general understanding of why people act the way they act, and not just being so judgmental. You know, take a walk in someone else's shoes, and then again, just staying abreast, volunteering our time, attending meetings like this with Corbin Snardon, sitting on boards, and, you know, requiring that of our staff to be able to be a resource to our residents.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Mr. White, same question. We know that you're in Illinois, so is there any differences?
Not too many. I just recently had, I believe, 3 tenants who have purchased homes. And with public housing, as Latoya stated, it was created back in 1935. It's all about the moving up and moving out, as their motto is. It's not to be your final destination. It's about trying to make moves. So I was talking to some of my staff about it the other day, and I told them, I said, yeah, we've had 3 tenants that have moved out and bought homes. They're like, well, that's bad for us. I said, no, but it may be bad for us as far as our vacancy, but it's good for them because they've made that goal to become a homeowner. So I'm proud of those tenants who have made that step, and well, former tenants who have made that step to become homeowners. Just over here, like Toya, we just have different organizations that will help our tenants get, if they need help with their paying rent, utilities. We do have different organizations that help with that. As far as this housing authority having a program, excuse me, we don't really necessarily have a program that helps tenants get to purchase homes or anything like that. I know Paducah in the past did have one when they had the homes over on where Lincoln Court is on the south side. They had a homeownership program that helped all those citizens of Paducah now that live over in the Lincoln Court area. I mean, it's still gonna be Lincoln Court to me, but they all were former tenants, and they purchased those homes through the homeownership program that HAP had at that time. So again, it's all about not becoming complacent and being a tenant of public housing wherever you are in the country. It's about trying to move yourself up into better places. And if we are and we, as Toya said, we're supposed to be here to help you walk in your shoes. If you've been there, I know myself. I'm a product of public housing. So I tell my staff all the time, I wouldn't move a tenant in any of my units, and I wouldn't put my mom in. And I go personally and check all units before a tenant looks at them. So it's all about you understanding where they're at and what you can do to help them get out of the situation. If it's a bad situation, if it's not, if this is where they are right now, just do what you can to encourage them to better themselves and look to the future, becoming a homeowner, getting more educated, and moving up. As that's what it's all about. Pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely. I definitely encourage everyone that I know, if homeownership is a possibility for you, please work your way towards that. Please set that as a reasonable goal. It can open so many doors. I'm going to even also take this time to, just be kind of colloquial and say, please don't sell grandmama's house. We've seen and also discussed on here where we've talked about, African Americans in particular have been, kind of shut out of, home ownership. But we've also seen that, for those families of color that have been able to afford homes in the past, and, that's why I said, don't sell grandmama's house, keep that land if you can, keep that home if you can, try to keep that up, because you're building generational wealth, you're building equity, you're building all of those things, and you're helping, to maintain your family and keep yourself at a status of living that you would like. I also want to comment on something that Latoya said earlier, and I appreciate you so much for saying it. We want to make sure that we're helping people and not, being judgmental and putting stigmas on people who are in public housing. Everybody is one day away from having, or one bad day away from being in a bad situation themselves. And that doesn't mean that anybody in public housing is in a bad situation. It just means that they're in public housing. So, we have to erode that stigma and not just, reserve it for the fact that we're saying that, oh, these people live in public housing. Some of the best minds and best people came from public housing. And so there is no reason to put a stigma upon those people. I do want to talk about we got about maybe 5 minutes or so, and I just want to briefly bring up this question. So we know about people in public housing, and you all are superb at what you do, and making sure that your tenants are well taken care of. But we also know that there are issues outside of the community that have to deal with, perhaps slumlords. I know that has been a conversation that I've had with several people in the community that are renters, and they want homes, but they're just not able to purchase them at that time. And they're living in a place where the landlord is not taking care of the property, where the landlord is just not doing their share. And I just want to talk briefly for a second. What should people do if they are caught in that situation?
Can I go first, Toya? Okay, first thing I'm gonna tell you to do is do not stop paying your rent. I've seen that happen. And if you stop paying your rent, that even though they may not be doing what they're doing, and that may be your first thought is to, I'm not gonna pay my rent since you're not gonna fix the ceiling. You'll go to court for eviction for non-payment, and the judge is gonna tell you, well, I understand they haven't fixed this, but you still have to pay your rent. So do not stop paying your rent, regardless. Depending on what you're doing, I'm gonna say I'm not really too educated on it, but I'm gonna assume, let's say if the slumlord is part of the section that is getting money from the government through Section 8, I think you would talk to the Section 8 department about reporting them about that. I mean, if they're getting funding, they are contracted, they're obligated through their contract with HUD to go in and fix any damages or anything that are done by that are done to the apartment. Regardless if it's done by the tenant, you can charge the tenant, but it has to be fixed. So that's something you just have to, a tenant should just report to with Section 8 with the Section 8 department about that. Same thing with public housing. If something's not fixed, I mean, we're obligated to fix it because in the mantra of public housing, we're supposed to provide safe and sanitary housing. If you're not doing that, basically your housing authority is a slumlord and your executive director is one. So just always report it, regardless if you have the access to call in HUD. With Paducah would be in Louisville, and Illinois they would call Chicago. So it's just about finding the right where you have to report it. I'm not sure about how it works with private private landlords, but I know through the HUD you can report it to HUD through your local home office in the cities.
Yeah. Latoya, do you have anything in addition to that?
Yes, I was going to say, irregardless, I think whether it's public housing or private, you always have the access to code enforcement through, city clerk office or things of that nature. So you have fire marshals as well. I know people don't think about the fire department if it's something electrical, like Mr. White said, if it's unsafe and you think about electrical hazards or something that could potentially cause fires and things of that nature. Or I've seen where, oh my Lord, sharing of utilities is off, have people sharing meters. So, that's something to be kind of take up or red flag to the public works as well. So just community resources, and then public servants, your mayors, your legislators, your aldermen, that's what's part of their job and part of the public service. They're supposed to be helping the U.S. The tenants or citizens in their area. So that's also an option to utilize.
Thank you both for that. I also want to give, in addition to that, anybody that's in that situation or struggling with that situation, I always tell people document. Yeah, take pictures, send those emails, have some kind of paper trail that, you can demonstrate that your landlord is not taking care of their responsibilities, and, that you have some kind of grounds if it has to go to court or if there has to be some kind of enforcement done outside of that. Well, we've come to the end of today's show, and I definitely want to thank both of my guests on here. Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you, Ms. Burton, for being on the show and sharing your expertise and insight onto some of these things. I definitely want to thank all of our viewers and watchers who tune into Power to the People, and we hope to see you again on our next episode. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon.